welcome back everyone. Chunk of Power here, doing something a little different this week. I am taking a look at the unadaptable novel. I've done a lot of videos on the adaptation from book to film, or remakes, or reboots, or what have you, whatever you want to call them. But this time, we have one that has never been adapted successfully to film or television, what have you. And I don't quite know why that is. I thought maybe once I looked at it I'd be able to figure it out, but let's take a walk through it and maybe you'll have some ideas I haven't thought of. The book we are talking about is A Confederacy of Dunces. I read it once, bought it, and haven't looked at it again, so I read it again for this video and really enjoyed it. A Confederacy of Dunces was written by John Kennedy Toole, born December 17, 1937, and died March 26, 1969. He passed away at the age of 32 when he took his own life, sadly. Now, although Toole attempted to have Dunces published during his lifetime, he was unsuccessful. The book landed in the hands of the publishers for Catch-22, and while they loved it, they passed on it because they felt that it wasn't really about anything, like no deep meaning and point to it necessarily. Now, after her son's passing, his mother, who was reportedly a domineering woman who, among other things, chose his friends for him, there were a lot of issues there, she made it her mission and fought tooth and nail to have her son's genius recognized and have this book published. It took a while, but she was successful. It was published around 1980, and this was the second fictional novel ever, only the second, to have the Pulitzer Prize awarded to the author posthumously. Now, as a high school senior, Toole, who was a great student, he was the editor of the school newspaper, he wrote another novel called The Neon Bible around 1954. This was also unpublished. He also tried to get this one published, but it was shelved eventually, and he decided it was really too juvenile to be worthy of publishing. As said, he was an excellent student. He excelled both at theater and academics. And later, he became a popular professor at both the University of Southern Louisiana and at Hunter College. He also spent a stint in the Army teaching English to Spanish recruits. And while there, he managed to wangle a private office, which is where he began writing Dunces. Like many authors, some of his life experiences found their way into the book. There was one point where a friend had a job working a tamale cart, and Toole spent some time helping him out on that. However, part of his help consisted of sampling the merchandise. He also worked for a men's clothing manufacturer, as his protagonist does in the book, and he spent some time discussing the works of philosopher Boethius with his fellow professor Bob Byrne, an eccentric character who played a lute and liked to wear a deerstalker cap. Those are also traits of the protagonist in the novel. However, the protagonist Riley is largely considered to be based a lot on Toole himself. Unfortunately for Toole, he kind of obviously had his issues as well, and he fell into alcohol abuse, depression, and paranoia towards the end of his short life. So let's just cover the story real quick in a highly efficient nutshell. The hero of the story, Ignatius J. Riley, which I keep wanting to say P. Riley, it sounds better, is a grown man who lives with his widowed mother, and the novel follows his misadventures. There is focus on the other characters, but that is a ripple effect as the direct result of his actions. Riley is quite the character among characters. He is a man set in his ways and convictions. He is often his own little world and quite the blowhard when he wants to be. He's continually berating his mother, his more or less girlfriend, co-workers, passers-by, and basically the whole world in general. We go along for the ride as he bounces unwillingly from job to job, attempts to execute social change without really understanding how, and unwittingly bringing down an illegal pornography ring. At 462 pages, This is one of those long reads that doesn't seem long. The plot keeps moving and the characters and doings are continually intriguing, so you keep wanting to know what happens next. Okay, so what doesn't really work? As you might expect from a 1960s novel written by a white heterosexual male, at least as far as we knew, there are things that don't play as well nowadays as they might have back in the day. Apologies, I had to adjust my camera. Now, as ever, this is from my tiny, cisgender, heterosexual white girl perspective. But most glaring, I feel, is the depiction of homosexuals. There is some basis for Toole's depiction here in his life regarding his army experience, which was an extremely individual event that I would suggest looking it up. It's a bit much to go into here. But we have a depiction of foppish, effeminate gay males who seem to live only for sexual games and parties. And then we have lesbians who are muscular, mannish, and spoiling for a fight. There's no deviation from these stereotypes that is apparent to the reader. However, here is something that is important to understand. This is a stereotype that was common at the time. The Pink Panther movies come to mind. Now, just having out and proud gay characters was a new thing, and it was quite a big deal just to acknowledge that they even existed. Also, I would say issue can possibly be taken with Toole's portrayal of black people. That said, the character of Jones is quite outspoken about the ingrown racism as society that he has to put up with just by virtue of existing. Again, especially at the time, that was quite a thing for a white author to acknowledge. So I'm not saying let's give Toole his roses, but I'm not saying let's cancel him either. In my opinion, may be framed by natural prejudices that I'm not aware of, as are many people's. If there's something here that I am missing, please do let me know. What I believe still works is the novel as a whole. This is one of those stories where just a whole bunch of strange things gets thrown at the main character. The difference here is that the main character instigates a lot, if not all, of it. Riley is hardly a reactive character, although he likes to believe himself to be, as well as a victim and a martyr. Now again, each and every character, to be believable as human, and to be sympathetic. Again, even the stereotypical ones, we have sympathy for them. Well, I shouldn't say all the characters are sympathetic, but even the ones who aren't, we understand why they are the way they are. And most of the characters we have more sympathy for than the main character, Riley. Again, most of these characters are just trying to live their lives before Riley comes in and messes with things. Even so, we have sympathy, if just sympathy enough, for Riley, which is quite a feat given how obnoxious the character is. I will say that he's trying to effect positive change, mainly for himself, but still, in a world he doesn't understand or even respect, he is lost in a world where he doesn't fit. This is an outsider character. And many of us can understand that, at least. Maybe we have more empathy for him than sympathy. He is definitely not perfect. No Mary Sue this one. But at least on paper, he is infinitely interesting. So, the adaptions, or lack thereof. Surprisingly, the also posthumously published Neon Bible did have a successful adaptation. Well, it was successful in getting adapted. It had a 1995 film version that did not do too well critically and didn't do too well at the box office. In contrast to that, there have been many attempts to adapt dunces. Let's go through the timeline. 1982. Carrie Shale of Thomas the Tank Engine fame reads through on the series A Book at Bedtime for the BBC, more or less an audiobook adaptation. Also 1982, Harold Ramis is keen to write and direct an adaptation with John Belushi. and Richard Pryor. But then Belushi passes away. Post-1982, oil magnate John Langdon now owns the rights to the novel and wants to make an adaptation starring John Candy. Candy passes on the film, and it again languishes. Now, stage adaptations, interestingly, have met with reasonable success, beginning in 1984, when Louisiana State University made it into a musical. Post-1984, John Waters voices interest in adapting a version to star Naturally Divine. Perhaps, fortunately, depending on your point of view, this version never comes to fruition. 1990, Carrie Shale again adapting the book into a one-man stage show. 1997, Stephen Fry is commissioned to write a screenplay by Paramount Pictures. The project is to star Chris Farley, who passes away that very year. 2005, Steven Soderbergh and Scott Kramer adapt the screenplay for direction by David Gordon Green. Will Ferrell and Lily Tomlin are slated to star. Now, despite a staged reading featuring Ferrell and Miara, Paul Rudd, Kristen Johnston, Yassine Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, Rosie Perez, Olympia Dukakis, Natasha Lyonne, Alan Cumming, this is a long list of Hollywood royalty here, John Shea, Jesse Eisenberg, John Conlon, Jace Alexander, Celia Weston, and Dan Hedaya. The film never got made. The official reason given was apparently legal issues, but that is unconfirmed. So a real reason is really pretty much still a mystery. 2012, a version directed by James Bobin and starring Zach Galifianakis, is that correct? was floated but then shelved. And in 2015, there was another stage venture by the Huntington Theater Company starring Nick Offerman. A little old for the part, but otherwise, I would say, damn, that's good casting. The play was one of the theater's highest grossing productions. And that's it so far. Now, perhaps someday we will see dunces on the big or small streaming Netflix miniseries adaptation screen, but right now, that possibility seems as remote as the Cubs winning the World Series. It can certainly happen, but we may have to wait a lifetime for it sort of category. In keeping with this parallel, Soderbergh is quoted as saying the project is cursed, and much of Hollywood seems to agree with him. Now, given the hardiness of the characters, casting would be very important. Personally, I would take Offerman, but Ferrell I don't think would be capable of hitting the requisite notes. What do you think? What is your dream casting for this project? And what format do you feel would be best for it to take life? Leave it in the comments below. I will see you next week. Until then, keep hanging in there, champ. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you then. Bye.